The Cosby Show episode, Vanessa's Bad Grade, which originally aired on NBC on January 16, 1986, by and large was fairly representative of the series. It focused on ordinary problems set against the backdrop of the Huxtable family's beautiful upper-middle-class home. What will happen when Vanessa tells her parents that she received a D on a history exam? Will Denise forgive Vanessa for borrowing a sweater without permission? How will the Huxtables resolve these problems, and in what ways does this family resemble our own? In the final scene of the episode, youngest sibling Rudy is up late watching television. As Mother Claire is about to admonish her, she stops when she sees and hears what is on the set, a broadcast of Martin Luther King delivering his famous address at the 1963 March on Washington. The entire family gathers in front of the television and reverently watches what is on the screen. The chatter of the Huxtable family has been silenced, the only sounds those of King delivering the speech that has functioned as a synecdoche, or a part representing the whole, for the civil rights struggles of the 1950s and 1960s. The scene not only functions as the show's commemoration of Martin Luther King's birthday, which would be celebrated 4 days after the broadcast, but is an instance in which the show makes visible what had been implied throughout the series. The Huxtables are the fulfillment of the dream King articulated that day in 1963. This episode also illustrates three primary ways we have defined the relationship between civil rights and television. First, it introduces to us that television has been an eyewitness to civil rights struggles. Not only did King's oratory find its way into living rooms across the country, but so too did images of college students beaten while peacefully trying to integrate lunch counters in North Carolina, or of police officers brutalizing and gassing marchers on their way from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. Television newscasts publicized the cause of and generated popular and political support for Southern civil rights throughout what historians have labeled the classical civil rights era, the decade between the 1954 Brown v. Board of Education decision and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Second, we can think of television as an historian of the civil rights era. Both in documentary and fictional programming, television has narrated the history of civil rights, often drawing on the newscasts of the period as its archive. Television, as in this episode of The Cosby Show, has structured our popular memory of what was civil rights by recirculating and reasserting the importance of certain iconic figures and moments of the movement. Finally, we can view television as our societal mirror. The presence and position of African American characters in television series has been designated as a site where dominant ideas about race and race relations in American culture are narrated. The Huxtables are a long way from Amos and Andy, characters that premiered on television in the early 1950s, or Fred Sanford, who first appeared in the 1970s, and, on the one hand, attest to the progress in race relations in the United States. On the other, in suggesting that America is indeed a colorblind society, and that race is no longer a factor in an individual's access to the good life, the show both reinforces prevailing ideas of the Reagan era about the end of racism, and erases and effaces the continuing struggles of African Americans by suggesting that racism is no longer a problem in American society. Cable television channels like Nickelodeon and TV Land continue to air episodes of The Cosby Show, alongside many other programs from television's past. These channels construct their own narrative of television history, juxtaposing the Huxtables with televisual families like the Jeffersons, the Cleavers, and the Clampetts. As we watch it, it is tempting to read The Cosby Show in relation to these other programs, viewing it as a symbol of television's, and our, success in overcoming the racial prejudices of our past. Yet we must take care to examine the historical and the ongoing struggles over television, in which what takes place both on and off screen has mattered profoundly to the fight for civil rights.
Protestants and Catholics will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last,